a missing girl, a family under investigation, and a case that seemed to go nowhere until it suddenly turned into something far darker. In 2024, concerns were raised about Celeste Rivas and her home life. Authorities stepped in, asked questions, and looked for any sign that something was wrong. But after everything was said and done, they walked away with one conclusion: there was no evidence of neglect, no proof of abuse, nothing that pointed to danger inside that house. For a moment, it looked like the system had worked exactly as it should. But what no one realized at the time was that the real threat might have already been outside the home, and much closer than anyone expected. And what happened next would turn a quiet investigation into a case that people still can't stop talking about. It didn't start with a crime scene. It started with a disappearance that didn't make sense. In early 2024, Celeste Rivas was reported missing not once, but twice. The first time raised concern, but the second time? That's when things started to feel different. Someone out there was worried enough to make a call, telling authorities there was a juvenile repeatedly running away. That single report was enough to trigger an official response. Deputies arrived at her home in Lake Elsinore, asking questions, trying to piece together what was really going on behind the scenes. From the outside, it looked like a standard welfare check, but cases like this can quickly turn into something much more serious. They spoke to everyone inside the house, searching for any sign that something wasn't right. Any tension, any inconsistency, any hint that Celeste might have been trying to escape something. But what they found was nothing. No visible signs of neglect. No evidence of abuse. No clear reason why a 14-year-old would keep disappearing like this. And yet, one detail stood out more than anything else. Celeste herself wasn't there to explain any of it. And without her side of the story, investigators were left chasing a mystery with a crucial piece missing. But that wasn't the only thing they hadn't uncovered yet. With no clear signs of trouble inside the home, the investigation quickly hit a wall. Deputies continued asking questions, going over timelines and double-checking every detail they could. Everyone present in the house was interviewed, and nothing stood out as suspicious. No contradictions. No warning signs. No evidence pointing to neglect or abuse. On paper, everything looked normal. But there was one problem investigators couldn't ignore. Celeste Rivas was still missing during all of this. Without her, there was no way to confirm what she had experienced, where she had been, or why she kept leaving. Deputies were left trying to solve a puzzle without its most important piece. And because of that, they couldn't determine if anything had actually happened at all. So eventually, the case reached a quiet conclusion. No charges. No further action. The family was effectively cleared. It seemed like the concern had been a false alarm, just another runaway situation that didn't point to anything deeper. But while authorities were closing the case and moving on, there were details outside that house, details no one had fully connected yet. And one of those details would soon raise far more questions than answers. The deeper authorities looked, the less they found, and that was the problem. Deputies went step by step, retracing timelines, asking the same questions in different ways, looking for anything that didn't add up. But every answer led to the same place: nowhere. The home showed no clear signs of danger, and the people inside weren't giving investigators a reason to push further. Everything appeared calm on the surface. But one detail made the entire situation harder to ignore. Celeste Rivas still hadn't been found. Without her, there was no way to confirm what was really happening. No first-hand account. No explanation for why she kept leaving. Investigators were left making decisions without the one voice that mattered most. And because of that, the case couldn't move forward. Eventually, it was closed with no evidence of neglect, no proof of abuse, and no charges filed. To authorities, it looked like a situation that didn't cross the line into something criminal. But sometimes, what isn't found can be just as important as what is. Because while this investigation was quietly coming to an end, there were connections forming in the background that no one had fully uncovered yet. And one name, in particular, was about to change everything. That name surfaced in a way no one expected, through a phone number. While going through records tied to Celeste Rivas, deputies came across contact with D4VD. At first, it was just another lead, another person to question. But the moment investigators reached out, things started to feel a little more complicated. According to reports, he told deputies he had last spoken to her just days earlier. He also claimed he didn't know she was a minor and said he had no idea she had been reported missing. On the surface, it sounded like a simple explanation. But the timing raised eyebrows. This wasn't some distant contact buried deep in her phone history. This was recent, close, active. And it introduced a new layer to a case that, up until then, seemed to lead nowhere. Then, just as suddenly as the questions appeared, Celeste Rivas returned home. For a brief moment, it seemed like everything might settle down. Like the situation had resolved itself before it could spiral any further. But that sense of closure didn't last long. Because even though the investigation had slowed down, the connection between them hadn't actually been broken. And what happened next would prove just how far that connection really went. When Celeste Rivas returned home, it seemed like the situation might finally be under control. Her parents reportedly took her phone, cutting off outside contact and trying to prevent any further disappearances. For a moment, it looked like the connection had been completely shut down. But according to reports, it didn't end there. It's been said that D4VD found another way to reach her, one that didn't rely on her original phone at all. Allegedly, he drove out to Lake Elsinore and paid one of her classmates a large sum of money to deliver a new device directly to her. If true, that changes everything. Because this wasn't contact anymore. This suggested planning, effort, and a determination to keep that line of communication open no matter what obstacles were in the way. And once that connection was reestablished, whatever distance had been created between them quickly disappeared. What had seemed like the end of something may have actually been the beginning of a much deeper situation. And the timeline of that connection? That's where things start to get even more unsettling. The more people looked into the timeline, the more uncomfortable it became. According to prosecutors, the connection between Celeste Rivas and D4VD didn't just start recently, it reportedly went back years. It's been claimed that the two first crossed paths as early as 2022, when she was still very young. At the time, it may not have raised alarms. But reports suggest that over time, that connection didn't fade, it grew. By late 2023, prosecutors allege the relationship had shifted into something far more serious. These claims haven't been fully detailed publicly, but they've been enough to spark intense discussion online, with many questioning how long this situation had really been developing behind the scenes. And that's where things start to feel different. Because this wasn't just a sudden encounter or a one-time interaction. If these reports are accurate, it points to a timeline that slowly built over months, possibly even years, without drawing the kind of attention it might have today. It raises a difficult question. How did something like this stay under the radar for so long? And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more concerning, April 2025 arrived. And what happened next would change everything. By April 2025, everything that had been building in the background suddenly came to a head. According to prosecutors, Celeste Rivas left her home once again, but this time, the situation would unfold very differently. Reports claim that D4VD arranged a ride for her, allegedly ordering an Uber to take her from Lake Elsinore all the way to his residence in the Hollywood Hills. It was a long trip and a deliberate one. There were no random encounters this time. No chance meetings. Every step, according to reports, had been planned in advance. When she arrived, what happened next became the center of the entire case. Prosecutors allege that shortly after reaching the home, Celeste was killed. The details surrounding that moment haven't all been made public, but the accusation alone sent shockwaves through anyone following the story. Because suddenly, everything that came before, the missed warning signs, the unanswered questions, the timeline people had overlooked, took on a completely different meaning. What once looked like a series of disconnected events now seemed linked in a way no one had fully realized at the time. And as the news spread, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a case about what happened that day. It was about everything that led up to it. After everything came to light, the earlier investigation into Celeste Rivas was looked at in a completely different way. Back in 2024, authorities had already examined concerns raised about her home life. At the time, investigators found no evidence of neglect or abuse, and the case was officially closed. Her parents were cleared, and the situation was treated as a resolved runaway case. But now, that conclusion sits next to a far more disturbing reality. Because people started asking a difficult question: if nothing was wrong inside the home, then where exactly did things go off track? Public attention quickly shifted, not just to what happened in 2025, but to everything that happened before it. The missed signals, the early disappearances, the connections that were only fully understood after it was too late. And even though investigators had already made their determinations back then, hindsight changed the way every detail was viewed. What once seemed like a closed case now felt incomplete. Online discussions exploded with theories, with people trying to piece together how so many moments could line up without raising stronger alarms at the time. But despite all the speculation, one thing remained unresolved. And it's the question that still follows this case everywhere it goes. How many of those early warning signs were truly understood before it was too late? When you look at the full timeline surrounding Celeste Rivas, it stops feeling like a simple missing persons case and starts feeling like a chain of moments that only make sense in hindsight. A 2024 investigation that found no evidence of neglect. A family that was officially cleared. A situation that, at the time, seemed resolved. And then a later case that completely changed how all of it is viewed. That contrast is what makes this story so unsettling. Because nothing in the early investigation officially pointed to what was coming next. Yet looking back, people can't help but wonder whether the full picture was ever truly visible at the time, or if the most important details were simply impossible to recognize until it was already too late. It also raises a broader question that goes beyond this one case. How many situations appear completely ordinary, right up until the moment they don't? And while the legal process has focused on evidence, timelines, and confirmed findings, the public conversation continues to circle the same uncertainty. Some questions have answers now, others don't. And maybe the most difficult part of all is knowing that for every conclusion reached, there are still gaps in the story that can't be filled.